Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode. My name is Cooper Bebo. I'm an actor, writer, and producer of film, television, and video games. This series is going to explore questions I've been asked about how to get into video games, how to make video games, and hopefully even answer questions that I had when I was thinking about doing it, as well as everything that came up along the way while developing my first game. I noticed there wasn't a ton of available podcasts specifically for what I was trying to do, whereas in the film and television world, there's a billion podcasts for every individual craft. So I hope this helps anyone out there who might be stuck or have questions like I did, or just need a little help getting started. This series will cover everything from pre-production, development, release, post-release, and even give helpful motivation and provide some psychology behind certain aspects that I have found hold people back. And with that, let's get started with this week's question.
What is your game about? I thought this would be a good question to answer and to sprinkle a few of these types throughout the series, ones that are a bit more personal to me and personal to my project, so that you can get a little bit of knowledge and get to know me a little bit better, so that you can apply my advice a little bit better towards your projects. I think learning a little bit more about what exactly my game is and more about me, you might see why I made certain decisions, and it may help you pick and choose what stuff you want to listen to me about. And so I thought I would share a few episodes like this that are a little bit more not directly tied to general advice, and this one's just going to be learning about the story of my game and what my game is all about, and then I'll also try to work in some advice as well, because I want every episode to have some kind of value to it as well. So, what is my game all about? There's a couple ways to answer that question. The first one is like the literal synopsis. In Billy Saves the World, you play a boy named Billy, and you're late for your 2-year anniversary with your girlfriend, and she breaks up with you for not being a dependable guy. You're not really a good boyfriend, and just when things can't get any worse, you're walking home sad, and a portal opens up beneath your feet, sucks you up, and you're transported mysteriously to an alien world. And it's there that you learn to become the dependable person you should have always been. That's kind of my little story pitch. I have a longer one. I have a more like professional one that I put in documents and stuff. But that's kind of that's if you caught me off guard on the street and you just asked me that question, that's sort of how I would say it. Now, because it's a video game, typically people don't ask you off the top, like, what's your game about? It's usually, what is your game, or what kind of game is it? Because people are usually, rightfully so, thinking mechanically and not narratively. And so mechanically and genre-wise, my game is a 2D open world platformer with the spirit of an adventure game. That's kind of how I'm positioning it currently. It's a very difficult game to describe, I've learned, because I honestly don't think I honestly really haven't played a game quite like it before, and it combines a lot of different genres in a way that I've never seen before. So it is difficult to get across the kind of game it is, especially if you're talking to someone, if I'm at work or I'm just talking to an average person who may just not really know much about video games, but they want to just get to know me more, and they ask that question. It's hard to really get it across, and so I typically just say like, it's just like a really cartoony. If you've played a game like Mario, it's like Mario, but you can talk to people in it. That's usually what I say to the like a person who if I don't think they know much about video games, that's kind of how I pitch it. But yeah, it's a difficult game to describe in terms of what you can do mechanically, because there is several things at work here. There's in one hand there is the platformer. And the types of platformers, I'm realizing more of my game is kind of like a challenging 90s platformer, particularly the original Rayman. I think that's probably the closest comparison I can make when it comes to the platforming. It's very parkour centric, so it's not really about getting loads and loads of abilities and moves. It's more about using just your body. So you're not getting weapons and attacking people. You're just sliding, you're running, you're jumping, and that kind of thing. And then that's combined with this, I say, the spirit of an adventure game, because I grew up on adventure games. I love adventure games, particularly the LucasArts ones that had a lot of humor to them, a lot of good character to them. And I say the spirit because it's obviously not a point and click adventure game. It's got the spirit of one. So by that I mean you will be getting to, it's narrative driven. You get to choose what you say to characters from a list of options. You get to choose how you respond, so that it's got sort of a 90. It has sort of a classic adventure game and also a Telltale like dialogue system. So your choices actually change the story, and depending on what you say, certain situations will happen and play out differently. So it has two kind of adventure game things there. And then on top of that, you have the puzzles that you would expect from an adventure game too. So you'll meet people, they'll need you to do something. You'll need to, combine this with this item to make this item and give them that item. So if you've played a point and click, a Monkey Island type of game where you're combining a jar of honey with a straw to make a snorkel or whatever it is, it's that kind of stuff. I tried to never get too whimsical or too illogical. I tried to make them pretty realistic. But the sort of the hook to the game is, and this I learned more so recently, that I'm really positioning this more so lately as the hook of my game, and it's that you can kind of lean the entire gameplay experience to the style that you prefer. So if you prefer playing platformers, you can advance through the main story primarily just by doing action platforming related things. If you find them too hard, or you don't like platforming, you can actually lean the gameplay experience to more of an adventure game, and you can progress through a majority of the story by doing puzzles and talking to people. And I'm trying to do that as much in the game as possible, so that you really do have a choice between the two the entire way. And you can almost get through the whole game by doing that. You will obviously, the basic controls involve you running around jumping. So you will have to jump, but you can avoid the majority of like the levels, the standard like platforming levels. And you can sub in doing puzzles and side quests in lieu of those if you want. And vice versa, if you get stuck on a puzzle or you just find one annoying, or you're not in the mood to solve a puzzle, you can sub out a puzzle for a platforming thing. So, and I do that by utilizing the open world, which is kind of the third component. And I've sometimes even compared it to Skyrim in this regard. The reason I use Skyrim is because you get this, it's a 2D open world. So you get this open world where you can go left, right, up, and down and explore it. And you will find caves and places to enter if you want to. And inside each cave is usually a standard left to right platforming level. Sometimes they're puzzles, sometimes they're just explorative areas. But that's similar to Skyrim or Oblivion or any of the Elder Scrolls games, where you kind of just have a land to explore, and you'll find these crypts or tombs or caves, and inside them are just kind of dungeons, basically. But then you'll also find settlements and towns and villages in Elder Scrolls games, and you'll find those as well in my game, and they're filled with friendly NPCs and these characters you can talk to get side quests. You can buy items from them. There's traders and that kind of thing. And so you have your main quest and you have a bunch of side quests. So it has this kind of weird, I don't want to use the word RPG, but it does have a kind of a strong adventure quality to it. And so I could really break it down even further, like just to give you an idea of how much variety is here. You could even say like the levels themselves. So if you go into a platforming level, they are standard left to right levels. So if you see a cave when you're exploring the open world and you go inside one, you're taken to a level, and then you have to complete that level. And if you complete it, you get warped out of the cave. And the levels themselves I can compare to like Sonic the Hedgehog in a weird way, because each level has kind of like an upper route, a lower route, and a middle route, kind of like Sonic the Hedgehog. So if you want to explore off the beaten path, you can do that, and you'll find more side quests or more secrets or more things or shortcuts. or sometimes an easier path, or sometimes if you fall from the difficult path, you'll fall down to the lower path, which is actually an easier path. So it's almost like a baked-in difficulty. So it's like if you're struggling with the main path in a level and you get knocked down, you don't necessarily die, you just get taken to a less difficult path. That's not how it always is, but I just try to design them interestingly like that, so that each level has tons of options. So when you add all those up, you've got 90s platformers like Rayman and Sonic, you have adventure games like Monkey Island and Telltale, you have these RPG like Skyrim things, and you have the open world aspect, so you have like a Metroidvania style, so you have all these different genres coming together, and it makes it for a very difficult game to talk about succinctly and to pitch. And I'm going to talk about that later on in marketing and PR episodes, because this is something that I do need to improve on that. I'm being very rough right now in this podcast because I'm just trying to give you a very broad strokes idea of the game. I would never talk about my game like I am in this podcast in a professional way, but I will show you what I've learned and what I'm focusing on for my game in later episodes on how to pitch your game and focus in on what makes it special and all that kind of stuff. But I'm kind of doing the opposite in this episode. I'm just giving you a very broad idea of all the different types of things that are in my game, just to give you sort of the complete idea, the full picture of it, rambling and all. So that's the genre, the mechanics, and the synopsis, or at least the starting point of the game. But there's also, I said at the beginning, there's two ways you can describe your game, and that's one of them. So if someone says, what's your game about? One way is to tell them the synopsis. The second way is actually something I've learned a long time ago. I was like around 23 years old. I'd finished my first movie, and I had a conversation with someone that I'll never forget. There was, at the time, I was living in Edmonton, and there was very few filmmakers in Edmonton. Like, we had made our first film, and that put us in a league with like two other people. Like, we were really we reached the ceiling of Edmonton by making one movie. And one of the other directors, who was a lot more experienced than us, he was older than us, he had just finished this huge project he'd been doing called The Pharmacist, and it did really well, and our movie was doing well, and he wanted to meet with us, just have a chat and talk, and we were like, yeah, cool, let's do it. And so we all met up. It was me, my writing partner Danny Mack, and this director. And at one point, the director asked, he asked, "What is your movie about?" And I'm really glad Dan asked or answered the question, because he actually said, I forget the word he said, but he said one word, like forgiveness or something like that. And the director said, "I'm so glad that you answered the question that way, because that shows me your movie actually is about something, because most people would answer that question with telling me the storyline of the movie or the synopsis." And I never forgot that, because I don't know if it just really stood with me that, and he went on to say more that stood with me, and what really hit home to me was that great stories or stories with depth to them you should be able to say a theme about your game, or your game should be about something. It doesn't have to be, but I just personally took that home with me, and I've brought that with me on everything that I work on ever since then. I always ask myself when I'm writing something, does this have a theme, or is this actually about more than it is? And I wrote the story to Billy Saves the World. I don't know if I've said the name of my game yet. I must have. But yeah, Billy Saves the World is the name of the game. And I technically wrote the game a long time ago, because it's been in development forever. I wrote it when I was very inexperienced and very young. So the theme at the time, that's why it was kind of just like, oh, a guy gets dumped. It was easy. And I've grown up a lot since then, and I'm hoping that I can apply what I've learned to future stories. But because this one project has spanned so much time, and I've been able to, for better or worse, I've been able to go back through the game, because as you go, games are always, they're iterative, they change a lot. You cut things, and when you remove parts of the game, you have to rework the story and make sure it all patches up and makes sense still. So I'm still rewriting stuff on a daily basis if I need to. And so whenever I get to do that, I try to sneak in some updated things, because as I've grown and as I've been ruminating about this game, I have thought to myself, what is the theme of this game? And along the way, I've realized and I decided that the theme of my game is choices and learning to live with the choices you've made, learning to live with the consequences based on the choices you've made. That's kind of what I'm thinking in my head. So whenever I go back through my story, I try to circle back and keep that theme running, because it was already naturally there. I just didn't really realize it. And now I'm trying to, whenever I get to, I go back and kind of bring that to the forefront and really make that a running theme in the game. Now, broad strokes, the game is extremely silly. It's a very silly, dumb, lighthearted, cartoonish game. Lots of silly humor. It's family friendly it's pretty much family friendly. So if you were to look at it from a superficial level, you would just play it, and you could probably finish the entire game without ever really thinking too deeply about anything. But I have tried to sneak in a through line through the whole game, like a genuine bit of heart through the whole game, so that people who do want that, or people who start to pick up on that, can really see that from start to finish. And hopefully by the end, there will be a payoff for that. And so the way that I accomplished this was in two ways, and I've sort of hinted at this before, but one is in the gameplay itself. So the player is always making choices, and through design, those choices, they have to live with those choices. So you can never go back once you make a choice in this game. You can't do one thing and then go back and see how it plays out the other way. Once you choose something, you have to stick with it. And so narratively and design-wise, the game makes the player go through those same things, where it's like, oh, okay, your choices do matter. There are weight to your choices. They have consequences. And it might be silly, like they might be dumb, and they might not be that big of a deal. It might just be like, oh, I made a decision and now that big blob of slime is mad at me, or now it won't talk to me. Like it's not like these huge things where it's like, oh, the whole town exploded and everyone died. It's not that kind of thing. It's subtle, but it's there and it exists, and it's kind of on a subconscious level is training the player to know that, hey, my choices do matter, and that's kind of, they can hopefully relate to the main character, Billy, because that's what he slowly learns through his journey through going through this game. And so, but for Billy, on Billy's side of things, he learns that his choices, like he's learning to deal with his consequences kind of in real time. You don't see the decisions that he made. Like the game starts and he's already late for his date, and he gets dumped for not being a dependable person and not being someone that his girlfriend can count on. So you don't see the years of mistakes he's made, or years of choices that have led him to that moment, but you're seeing the after effects of those decisions play out in real time now. Like the game begins basically at the aftermath of his choices, and so you're kind of learning that as a player and as Billy at the same time. And another way that I achieved this was that, and I was able to go back and with actually very minor changes, do something that I'm really happy with, which is I tried to design all of the side quests with the theme of love and relationships. So almost every side quest you encounter in one way or another, it's not necessarily always right on the nose. Sometimes it is. But other times it's a little bit more obscure, but almost every side quest is actually representing a different kind of relationship or a different kind of love, whether it's a girlfriend, boyfriend, or like a love of a friendship or a pet, or just a vast array of different relationships, abusive relationships, regret in relationships, or being too obsessed in a relationship, getting dumped or being ghosted, like all these different things that can happen to someone. I tried my best to cover the gamut of every kind of relationship that you could have or that a human could experience in real life. I've tried to capture that in every side quest. And the reason I did that was because I wanted the theme the relationship theme of the game to kind of shine through, because I wanted people to remember that this is kind of a love story, and if other characters are going through these similar things, that kind of reinforces the theme of the choices and living with choices and all that kind of stuff. So that's another way that I'm trying to achieve bringing the theme to the forefront without beating you over the head with it. And now, like I said, the love story is actually kind of the minor part, the through line of the story. There is more of a major plot point, and that is, it's more the cliche thing where it's like you uncover, an ancient prophecy on this alien planet. You realize you're apparently some kind of, special person. And there's a lot more cliche sci-fi stuff that occurs on this planet, but it all kind of intertwines. There's some kind of there's a bit of faith versus science, or not necessarily that, but fate versus destiny and that kind of stuff, which does intertwine with the love story as well. So everything, I tried to make it dance as well as possible. Whether or not I pulled it off, we will find out when the reviews come out. If people say that the plot line was terrible, then I guess I did not do a good job. But I'm really enjoying how I've balanced, cheesy, cliche sci-fi stuff with a genuine, touching love story, with humor, with heart, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm juggling a lot of balls here, and both in terms of mechanics and story. And I'm hoping that the result is a Cirque du Soleil and not a bumbling fool on the side of the street. Now, I will say that this is a very ambitious project, especially for a first project, and that's why it's taken so long. I don't necessarily recommend everyone do that, but I would say, like my earlier episodes, do what you're passionate about. This is the kind of thing that I was passionate about, and it was feasible and it was within reach. Everything kind of lined up for me, and again, I will explore all of these and how I pulled it off in later episodes. But if this is sounding very big to you, it is. It is quite a complicated thing to pull off for your first game. But I do recommend you do what you're passionate about, and if you are trying to make a game that does have a narrative focus or has a story, it's story driven in any way, I do recommend trying to find a way to tell the story in a easy, simple, digestible way, and also try thinking about the theme of your game. And I think it really helps writers out a lot, because if you get to know the theme of your game, even if you're halfway through it, you can sometimes it reveals itself to you without you even trying. Sometimes just while you're writing, it'll just hit you like, oh, this game is actually about revenge, or oh, this is actually about moving on or something. You'll sometimes just through writing or through thinking about stuff, it'll be revealed. And I really recommend trying to figure out what the theme of your game is, because it does help you finish it. It does help you write things, and it will help you make decisions later on as well that you'll be faced with. Sometimes you'll hit an obstacle and you'll have to make a decision between this or that. And sometimes it'll be like, well, this one lines up with the theme a lot better. That means I'm going to go this way. So the theme is very important. It's very helpful. It's helped me narrow down and focus and make a lot of decisions on this game. So if there's one tip to take away from this week's episode, it is that coming up with a theme to your story is very important. It's very helpful. The second thing would be to make sure that your storyline is simple and digestible and you can tell it very easily. Don't let it take over your game. Don't let it get in the way of the mechanics too much. Depending on what kind of game you have, my game, I'm allowed to let my story take over at times because it is very narrative driven. But like I said in my last episode, you have to pace it correctly. Pacing is very important. So you have to earn the player's attention before you can knock them over the head with your story. So pacing is key. Pay attention to that. Make sure you can introduce your story slowly once you've been able to win them over, and then kind of gently massage it into the game so that it's very digestible. And then eventually you can have, like in my game, I do have eventually in later parts of the game, I have long scenes that it's just reading. You're just reading the storyline, because at that point I'm hoping that if you've gotten that far, you're probably into the storyline and I've got your attention, so it's okay to do now. So make sure you're able to tell a simple story. Try not to get too lost in world building and lore, like I mentioned last episode. Like I said before, my game starts off, you're just a guy, you're just a person who gets dumped. It's a very simple thing. So try to start off simple, something that people can latch onto, and then slowly introduce the storyline. Keep it simple, and keep it simple and come up with a theme. Two very important things. And if you know those things and you can keep focus on those two things, it will really help your writing process and the entire development of your game. It will really help make it a lot easier.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, I'm hoping to share insights from my game development journey, from mistakes I've made or things that have worked that you can apply directly to your journey. It's worth reminding that I had no rich relatives, connections, or a boatload of cash. I didn't even go to school. So my advice is coming from where most people start from, ground zero with nothing. My hope is that this common ground can set a more realistic idea of what you can expect, using me as your guide. I post new episodes every week on patreon.com/CooperBebo, so if you find these helpful and you want to show support, you can do that for just $1 a month, plus unlock some bonus perks. I do have an entire series planned, and I plan to be quite thorough, but if you want to just make sure I cover a specific topic or answer a personal question, that is available for patrons. But again, I plan on covering everything, so you'll most likely get the answer you need right here for free on YouTube. Thanks again for listening. I appreciate every listener, and I really hope this helps someone out there somewhere someday start their journey into game development.